Hi, I'm Dr. Martin Rutherford. I am a chiropractor since 1979 and a certified functional medicine practitioner.
Dr. Randall Gates, I'm a chiropractor as well as being a board-certified chiropractic neurologist.
And today we're going to talk about fibromyalgia, but we're going to talk about a study that indicates that it believes that it is proven that fibromyalgia is caused by gluten sensitivity.
Mm-hmm.
I practice functional medicine and chiropractic. Dr. Gates, almost said the S word, specialized. Dr. Gates' discipline is in brain work, functional neurology, the ability to evaluate brain function and change brain function without drugs. And between the two of our disciplines being melded, we have developed a chronic pain practice. And a substantial portion of our chronic pain practice is fibromyalgia patients, are fibromyalgia patients. And I think we get pretty consistently good results, better than good results, in a sense that fibromyalgia patients have a lot going on. And so we thought we would like to bring some clarity to this study. Apparently, there's been a lot of going back and forth in at least the academic literature. And we'd like to bring to you what we have found relative to fibromyalgia, its causes, and the variety and the complexities of the issues that come together and create this rather eclectic set of symptoms that fibromyalgia patients can experience. So, and the sun is shining on there, so I cannot see what this says. Fibromyalgia, is gluten the cause?
Well, that's what this study raised the question of. So basically, they took a certain number.
Tell them about the study.
So they took a certain number of patients and they screen them to see if they have celiac disease. Celiac disease is an autoimmune condition where the person's immune system will try to kill gluten if it comes in through the gastrointestinal tract.
Mostly in the small intestines.
Yes, and for any of you watching out there, gluten is a protein that's in wheat, barley, oats, and rye. And it's gained a lot of notoriety over the last couple of years relative to it may be causing things like obesity and depression and gastrointestinal problems, even in patients who don't have this frank autoimmune disease called celiac disease. So they took these fibromyalgia patients, and in essence, they made sure they didn't have celiac disease. And however, they went into their small intestines, and they saw that in their small intestines, there was a lot of inflammation. In fact, all of them had small intestinal inflammation termed intraepithelial lymphocytosis. Basically, there's just a lot of immune cells there. And that can be associated with gluten reactions. So then they took these fibromyalgia patients, took them off of gluten, and saw that pretty much all of them improved. In fact, I believe all of them either were able to get off their opiate medications like hydrocodone, Percocet, OxyContin, for all of you out there taking those types of medications, or they were able to go back to work, or they felt considerably better. And basically the study concluded that gluten is a major issue for these fibromyalgia patients. It's something we need to look at.
Well, is that what it says, or does it say that's the cause of fibromyalgia?
They're saying that it's a cause.
Okay.
Yeah.
A cause.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we'll clarify that.
Yes.
But, well, that's not completely inaccurate then.
No, because within our framework and all of the work that we've done on fibromyalgia, we understand there really to be three major causes to fibromyalgia. Yeah, gluten can fit into the immune model, and we're going to go into that more specifically as well.
I do most of the, I do pretty much all the intake work here relative to doing initial consultations with the patients that come to us from all over the place. And so we want to make sure first that the patient is a good candidate for what we do. There are just a variety of red flags, both subjectively and objectively, that will kind of let us know that maybe this patient might not respond the way that we think we'd like them to respond. And in doing those interviews, frequently at this point in time, a lot of people have already gotten off of gluten. Mm-hmm. A lot of the patients have already gotten off, and I will say it's unusual for one to say, "Oh, I didn't see any change." Mm-hmm. virtually all of them will say that I've seen a change. Now, I asked Dr. Gates beforehand how long the study was, and it was 18 months. So that's pretty long.
Yeah, basically for 16 months, they were better.
Yeah. Most of the patients that come in here, obviously they wouldn't come in here, but most of the patients that come in here would say, I got off of it. I felt good for 6 weeks or 3 months or 6 months, maybe. But then things started to fall apart. And then I started to get the problems again. And then my gut started hurting me again. So that's more of the reality of what we see relative to gluten and fibromyalgia, which brings to light that there is a variety of different reactions and a variety of different percentages of contribution to the immune mechanisms you're going to talk about relative to gluten. So our understanding is gluten is not the cause of fibromyalgia, but it definitely is contributing to one of the major systems that are causing fibromyalgia. And we have pretty definite definition here relative to fibromyalgia and what it is and how to go about handling it. And we'll share that with you later on in this discussion. But right now, the question is, how could gluten conceivably cause fibromyalgia, and how do you want to approach that?
I think we should go back to an article that we presented back in January. It just came out in the Journal of Clinical Rheumatology that month. And they discussed that a huge percentage of fibromyalgia patients have an autoimmune, that's where the immune system kills the body, thyroid disorder called Hashimoto's thyroiditis. How did the speaker say it last night? Hashimoto's? So, Hashimoto's. That's what it is. Hashimoto's. Well, we've always heard it as Hashimoto's.
Yeah,
but
you caught that too.
Hashimoto's. So anyways, a large percentage of the fibro patients have that. And Hashimoto's is a very prevalent condition in our society. Upwards of 15% of women have it at a very, very pronounced level. We theorize that probably another 15% at least have it at a moderate level. Anyways, that being said, in the Journal of Clinical Rheumatology, they theorize that the immune inflammation from the immune system killing the thyroid was causing inflammation throughout the body that was causing fibromyalgia patients to have more pain throughout their body. An interesting thing is that studies have been conducted where they've shown that with Hashimoto's patients, upwards of 50%, the statistics were actually 47%, have antibodies to gluten.
Yeah, it was like 75% years ago. But,
and it may be. Yeah. That was one of the ones that I saw. So anyways, a significant percentage. And you have to realize with antibody testing, these immune cell counts can go up and down. If you keep running them over time, lots of times you see a better pattern than just over a month-long period. And I only say that to say that it possibly could be higher than 47%.
So you might get tested. So if you're out there and you're wondering if you got a gluten sensitivity, you might get tested and you might be told you're fine.
Right.
Because relative to what Dr. Gates just said, your antibodies on that particular day may not be available to the test, that it may be down. And then you may be going through a normal day, maybe a stress or something like that, or just you're doing a lot or whatever, or your immune system's been, you're getting a little flu or cold, whatever, and your immune system now has to fire up, and these antibodies now become more numerous and they become more available, and now you take the test, and all of a sudden the test that was normal a week ago is off the charts. I mean, it can be that variable.
Exactly. So that was a really big finding, and so that in the natural treatment of Hashimoto's circles, and even in most of the endocrinology books, they'll acknowledge that gluten can be a causative factor for Hashimoto's. Yeah. And it's very interesting relative to this discussion, because now they're seeing that here we have a large group of fibromyalgia patients, and in essence, once they went off of gluten, their fibromyalgia pain went better. So you can see kind of we have an A plus B plus C type relationship.
Well, and maybe I'm going to muddy the water here, and I apologize if it might throw some confusion here, but how do you know those people don't have celiac?
Because they made sure they didn't have celiac. They actually did ensure that these patients.
Did they do biopsies? Okay.
They did biopsies, did all the TTG.
Because the celiac testing is kind of all over the place too.
Right.
Okay.
And that's where it's interesting with the study that they actually saw all the inflammation in the GI tract, but not the other antibody profiles, and not the duodenal, the villus atrophy. We're talking about the specifics of celiac diagnosis. In essence, to be diagnosed with celiac, you either have to have a certain type of immune cell, termed the tissue transglutaminase, that has to be incredibly high. I hope you don't mind me saying. Yours truly had that on your testing.
Oh, me?
Yeah.
I think I had the highest ones that we've ever seen here in this clinic. I have celiac, yeah.
So that's pathognomonic for it, as well as you can have what's termed a duodenal biopsy, where they go in and they go into the small intestine and they look to see how the small intestine looks. Your small intestine should look like those little things in the ocean with the little fingers. What are those called? Sea anemones? Are they sea anemones? Yes. Okay. And in celiac disease, the little fingers become blunted, and that's called villus atrophy. They also see a lot of immune cells in the intestines of celiac patients, termed intraepithelial lymphocytosis, which they saw with the fibro patients, but they didn't see the fingers being blunted.
So the point here, not that, because I'm sure I added confusion there. The point here is that in this study, all these patients did not have celiac disease. So you would expect someone who has celiac to get off of gluten to feel better immediately, but not necessarily. You wouldn't necessarily feel someone who is not have been diagnosed with celiac to feel better immediately. And these were patients who did not have celiac disease but had fibromyalgia. They got off the gluten, they felt better immediately. All right. So my apologies if I took you if we went too far off the corner there. So how when we were discussing this, your comment was, well, how could gluten conceivably cause fibromyalgia?
And the thought process is that basically the gluten molecule, and thank you for bringing that back. The thought process is that the gluten molecule is creating a lot of inflammation. We don't know why. We've done whole hour-long presentations on gluten, I think twice. And in essence, relative to gluten, there's some theory that the molecule has changed. It's become a tougher molecule to digest. We don't need to get into all of the differing theories as to why that's happening. It just seems to be occurring. Celiac disease used to occur in 1 in 1,000 people. Now it's 1 in 100. So the gluten molecule, some say, is inflammatory. It's hard to break down. As a result of that, the immune system is getting overreactive to the gluten molecule. It appears in the study, as is evidenced. And that inflammation can then flood throughout the rest of your system. 70% of the immune system is right here in the GI tract, 70%, because this is where we're most likely to die. We're going to eat or drink something that could kill us, like cholera, like certain types of E. coli, 0157. And so our immune system is poised and ready. The problem is when we have a hard to break down food molecule, then that may be creating inflammation going throughout the system, causing the nerves to become more sensitive, more specifically the spinal cord more sensitive to pain. Okay.
All right. So,
and then I would like to take that gut-brain connection.
No, I was going to say, so the question was, how could gluten conceivably cause fibromyalgia? I think the point being that gluten actually creates inflammation.
Yeah.
Gluten creates inflammation, and inflammation affects the immune system. As Dr. Gates has already stated, every fibromyalgia patient that comes in here has some sort of an immune problem. Most often, it's at least a thyroid problem. Frequently, it is a gut problem. Frequently, they are in here with celiac, but this was a study on people who didn't have celiac. Frequently, it is celiac. And so frequently, there is a brain problem, part of which you just started to get into.
Right.
Relative to not being able to filter out the pain. So
and when you say frequently they have celiac, I'd say frequently celiac or non-celiac gluten sensitivity. That's how I would term it. Just because we have a lot of people out there watching now, and we get all these comments, well, you said this, but you said that.
Okay.
And then I have to write them back at 11 o'clock at night. This is what we were really saying.
So there is a connection between this gut and the brain and the immune system. And so one of the things that might be valuable for you to understand is the gut-brain connection in general and in this particular situation.
Yeah, in essence, we're finding that this organ in here, our gastrointestinal tract, has this living universe of bacteria called the microbiome. And the microbiome interact with us in several key ways. They can create inflammation if we have the wrong concentrations of them, and that inflammation can affect the brain. We know that certain foods they like to feed on, and that will cause them to bloom, and that inflammation from the bacteria blooming can affect the brain. We know that the bacteria can actually make neurotransmitter-like chemicals that can affect our own thought processes. It can affect the way they interact with each other.
All in the literature.
All in the literature. In fact, I attached an article to this broadcast. It's out of the Journal of Medical Food, I believe, called Gut Microbes in the Brain. So for any of you who are inquisitive, go ahead and look at that. And one of a gentleman that we've referred to, and I guess I could say he's one of our colleagues, he wrote a book called Grain Brain. And so he was demonstrating the connection between food and the brain. But really, it's all about the food we eat, how it interacts with the bacteria, what the bacteria produces, byproducts, and then how those byproducts affect the brain. And there's an old saying, fire in the gut means fire in the brain. So basically, the more inflammation you have here, as is evidenced by the study, the more your brain can be affected in a negative manner.
Exactly. So there's a lot going on here. So when we get a fibromyalgia patient, for example, when I'm doing the consult, I'm listening for stress. I'm listening for a stress trigger. I don't know if I'm getting ahead of myself here. We're listening for things that create a chronic stress situation, which we're going to discuss. I'm usually listening for, at the very least, an immune problem. We're looking for an immune history, but I mean, I don't know what the high percentages of people who have that have fibromyalgia have this Hashimoto's thyroiditis. I mean, to me, it feels like it's like 99.9%. It may not be that high because that's our patient population and that's what we see, but it's a rare case of fibromyalgia that comes in here that doesn't have Hashimoto's. And then there are certain exam findings that we would be looking for. So we have a very clear picture of what we find clinically to be the entities that create this eclectic pattern of pain that we call fibromyalgia. Fibromyalgia is kind of a dumb name, frankly. It means pain in the muscle fibers. And as we discussed in one of our fibro cases, it's actually neurological pain.
Right.
It's actually not muscular pain. And so we usually will tell people, look, if you have fibromyalgia, we have to treat what's causing the problem. We can't treat the diagnosis, because everybody that comes in here with fibromyalgia has some combination of the three causes that you're going to discuss. Mm-hmm. And within the framework of those three causes, it has a number of perpetuators, one of which is food. Exactly. Is that a good way of putting it?
That was perfect.
Okay. So we define it. We have three major causes that the three things that we see as major causes of fibromyalgia over and over and over and over and over again. And most people have all of them. And so Dr. Gates would like to discuss that with you.
So upwards of 1 year ago, the current understanding of fibromyalgia is that it was just this phenomenon called central sensitization, which is where we all have nerves that send pain signals. So if I stab myself right now with this pen, I'd have pain right there. And signals would go up my arm into my brain telling me what had happened. We all have those signals in the background all the time. They're just dampened out by our brain, just like I don't feel the shirt on my back. However, with fibromyalgia patients, the balance shifts. And so they start to feel those pain signals at an abnormal rate. And so that was the current understanding in the fibromyalgia literature as of a year ago. And the understanding was that there were probably two major causes to that whole phenomenon. One was chronic stress. It's abysmal to hear these stories that we listen to all the time relative to the abuse that so many fibromyalgia patients.
Most of our fibro patients come in with either like physical abuse, verbal abuse, sexual abuse, or some trauma. Like I walked into the room and my husband was lying there dead.
Right.
I mean, something really horrendous that gets into their limbic system and their brain, and it just doesn't ever go away. And then it creates a chronic fight-flight syndrome, or a lot of people seem to understand it better when I say it creates kind of a chronic post-traumatic stress syndrome. Mm-hmm. And then that creates an abnormal chemistry in the body, which dovetails into the other things that Dr. Gates is going to talk about to create these pain issues that are very real.
In fact, we've had a lot of thank yous from people out there watching, thanking us for bringing that to the forefront, because
it's real.
It's something that's not talked about many times. We're the first person to hear from an adult that, 40 years ago, if something happened, they just felt like they never could tell somebody. They never knew it really affected them in that way. Well, it does. And as Dr. Rutherford says, it's kind of a PTSD-like phenomenon. And the problem is that when you're stressed chronically, you make stress hormones. Adrenaline is very bad for pain nerves. So adrenaline basically binds onto the pain nerves and causes them to send more signals. And so we thought that was one mechanism, or we knew that was one mechanism behind this fibromyalgia condition. The other is immune inflammation. That was even being talked about for quite a while. Then recently we learned about the thyroid connection to the inflammation. Now we're seeing the gluten connection. We're going to talk about one other connection there too. But the third issue that just came out in the last year is small fiber neuropathy. So neuropathy.
And we saw that.
We saw
for
it.
ages.
We saw it
for ages. Yeah. We do a full exam on everybody, head to toe. No matter what you come in with, you get the same exam. It is head to toe, everything, and we check everything out. And Dr. Gates does the neurological aspect of the exam. Half of these people or more.
Yeah, exactly.
Full neuropathy.
And then it came out in the literature. Half of fibromyalgia patients have small fiber neuropathy. And basically neuropathy is where the nerves start to degenerate and die. And small fiber means the pain nerves. So the pain nerves have a very small diameter to them. And so in fibromyalgia, those are selectively involved. Yeah. Yours truly has it.
Celiac, fibromyalgia. And by the way, I had peripheral neuropathy too. Long before they discovered that.
And so they found that those abnormal pain signals are also associated with the fibromyalgia pain that many of you experience. And really what's interesting now relative to this, let's go back to the immune issue. So we talked about Hashimoto's, and we're talking about gluten. A study just came out where they were looking at rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, and fibromyalgia patients. And they were actually able to observe a certain pattern of inflammatory immune cells that are highly associated with fibromyalgia, not seen with RA, not seen with lupus, because rheumatoid arthritis and lupus are autoimmune conditions. Well, they're now seeing that fibromyalgia has its own set of immune chemicals. That's a big deal.
First time I've heard this. Okay.
Yeah,
this
first time I read it this morning.
Research and development department right here.
And it's really cool. And it's some of the tests that you used to run. So when I first came into practice with Dr. Rutherford was running the cytokine tests. Right. There are these panels of immune messengers. Think of the army, you got the general, and then you got the guy who goes over and tells the other general what to do. Well, he's a messenger. Well, in the immune system, we have the same thing, and you can take someone's blood and see how many messengers they have. And they're seeing that fibromyalgia patients have a certain pattern of these chemical messengers, which will be good because that will aid as everybody loves lab tests. Everybody loves an MRI.
Might be the first time we can say this, to give to the fibromyalgia patient something that says you're not crazy.
Exactly. All of you are looking for.
More importantly, to their doctor.
Or their husband.
Or their husband.
Or their wife.
Or their wife. Say your wife or your doctor, to their doctor, these people are not crazy. This is for real. Wow, that's exciting.
Yeah, really exciting.
First time I've heard that. That is really exciting because that is a huge struggle for patients. So, so in summation, I don't know if we were like in summation, but so how does gluten affect the fibro patient, and why? Because I know you're gonna have an answer to this, because I think I have the answer. Why did those people respond so remarkably well versus the people who come in here who responded just temporarily and then had setbacks? Most of our patients, most of the people who come in here and ultimately become our patients, many of them say, no, I feel much better, but there's a lot more to do. Right. I felt much better, and then I didn't feel as good, or I felt much better, and then I didn't feel as much good, so I stopped. So I started eating gluten again, because why should I not eat pasta when I love it if it's not the cause?
Exactly. Okay, I will hit all that. And one thing I wanted to clarify and to say is that they did document that some of these fibro patients didn't feel better for months after being gluten-free, but then finally things shifted in their physiology, and then they started to feel better. So just know it may not be an immediate reaction. For some it is, for some it takes a while. There are a lot of studies showing that basically once you have gluten, it takes a while for it to flush out of your system.
The whole gluten thing is for real, but it is just, it's just the iceberg. It's just in the evolution of understanding.
And so in essence, what we've seen, we did gluten-free diets 5 years ago. We've gone way beyond that because we've found other foods in our clinical experience can be just as problematic as gluten. So what Dr. Rutherford is saying is that if you've gone gluten-free and maybe you felt better, but then your symptoms came back, you may need to consider that other food you're eating may be just as problematic as the gluten was. Also realize, just as we discussed, there are many factors involved with fibromyalgia. It's not just one thing. It's not just small fiber neuropathy. It's not just gluten. It's not just Hashimoto's.
Right.
So
it's complex.
It's very complex. So it's this web. So you may eliminate gluten, but then maybe you have something else affecting your small fiber neuropathy. Maybe you have pre-diabetes. That's a blood sugar problems that are affecting this because you're stressed out of your mind. Or maybe you got a viral infection that threw off the Hashimoto's that may have been triggered by the gluten issue. May have been. So these are all potential issues that can maybe make it difficult for you as the patient out there thinking, it's one-to-one. It's not one-to-one.
Yeah. And as a clinician or as a patient, you need to find a clinician who understands that, because otherwise you're going to go through what I call, what my mentor calls nibbling, which is, okay, I went to this doctor and they gave me something for my stress. And I went to this doctor and they gave me low dose naltrexone for my pain. And I went to this doctor and they saw, you didn't even mention small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, which is something in your gut. And they gave me an antibiotic and I felt good for a while, but it came back. And there's a lot of factors, and they all need to be assessed and determined before or in the very beginning of treatment to determine which, remember I said, treat the patient, not the diagnosis, or all the fibromyalgia patients are different. Which factors are the factors that are creating the problem for this patient versus the next patient? And when you start multiplying the number of factors that there are times themselves, the combinations are probably in the hundreds of thousands, by the time you multiply them all. But it's not that hard to figure out if you understand all this and you test it all at once, and then understand that there's actually even an order in which each one of these contributing causes needs to be handled, and I may be getting too far off into another direction there, but so the gluten is a factor. The gluten is probably close to our only standard recommendation. Okay, I think it's fair to say we want to acknowledge that pretty much most of our patients end up not eating gluten.
Right, and we're not telling you not to eat gluten because you're not under our care.
There you go. But that's pretty much in the realm of fibromyalgia. That's pretty much our only standard recommendations. And not unlike that test, we will some patients we will see dramatic improvement in when we take them off gluten, and some patients we will see no improvement. So it is not the cause of fibromyalgia, but certainly it is a contributing factor to what the causes are.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. I think that's the point.
Okay. So I hope that helps. Any specific questions, you can send them to powerhealthtalk.com or send them to his email.
Send them to our Facebook page, Power Health.
I'm computer illiterate.
Oh boy.
Thankfully. Yes. Okay. So until next time, thanks for watching.
Yeah. Thank you.